When we were doing the book, we actually must have spent about 40 or 50 of these discussions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then it's all disappeared. Now, I know you've been teaching from the book over the last few years, and I have as well. But you don't know some of the things I've been doing, and I don't know anything about what you've been doing.
No, we've been out of touch for a couple of years.
So, I wanted to tell you that we started using Chapter 1 for students to read before they start our leadership.
Sorry, that shows how much I can't remember.
Well, the Chapter 1
Chapter 1's the metaphor, the map.
Yeah, it's all about the map.
I use that.
It's all about the map.
It's Chapter 2,
Yeah, now I have to tell you, it's really difficult. Students, we've really got to rewrite it for some other edition.
Right.
But that being said, it's actually quite useful because it spans the whole leadership material. This introduction to all the other chapters. So I'm pleased that I go on using it, but I'd like to revise it. Now I know that you do other things, and I know some of your expertise is not the same as mine. So what chapters do you find useful for teaching?
Well, when you say that, I mean, I actually always started off with Chapter 1. I use that as the map. I find it very useful for that. I mean, what you're saying about it, maybe need to rewrite it in terms of students finding it difficult. Yeah, I can see some of that. But it's moving on to what you're saying. I mean, I always set off anything I do with managers and people like that is to get to think about what are their conceptions and perceptions of leadership. So I always start off, the classic. There are three classic questions, aren't there, that people always ask about leadership, and all the books sort of say. There's what's an effective leader? Are leaders born or made? And difference between leadership and management. Well, the idea of leadership and management doesn't interest me too much because I think they're one and the same in some respects. So I always concentrated around starting off what's effective leadership.
Right.
And what I found the most useful for that is our Chapter 4, the magic of leadership.
Right.
Because that's how people perceive leaders, this charismatic person. It's all about change and transformation. And so very much I always really used that one to start it off and introduce the whole idea about leadership. And then trying to get people to realise that this notion of charisma, I don't know what's the word, trying to articulate it. It's not a misnomer, but it's something that as you were saying earlier, we all think of people as charismatic. You have to be charismatic to be a leader, but you don't, and there's a lot of evidence you don't. So I use that to introduce, let's look at what leadership is. What are your conceptions of leadership? So we can sort of unpack some of that. And then that really gives them the grounding in leadership theory and all that sort of stuff. And because it's great to teach from, because being charismatic stuff, you can put people who are charismatic and you can give them examples. But what I find it lets you down is it's all about these top leaders and the people who are bigger, larger than life figures. And that's not what the people coming on courses are. No. And so I try to sort of get to them, well, look, there are different ways of doing it. And so then the next chapter that I always go into then is the trust one.
And that's something I don't think I do enough of. I know you're an expert on that. So what do you get out of that? What's the way you manage that chapter?
Well, I take them through it, sort of the idea that there are different ways. And Monty Roberts figures big in it, the myth of the gentle. Right. Because that always impressed me with that, because it is. And in my experience when I was a manager as well, if you were listening to people, trying to be a bit more benevolent and care about it and be calm, then you were seen as weak.
Yeah.
And it's the myth of the gentle, just because you're calm and that, you're not necessarily weak. And of course all these larger than life leaders with you, they're all control freaks and they're there and they don't take prisoners, and it's all very much the mandrill management stuff. So I use the trust chapter to bring in the ideas of different leadership styles, with the mandrill through the geese and the elephant and the chimps, because I try to say, look, there are different ways of doing it, and in some situations you want to be the mandrill, maybe, but I get much more out of being the more sort of benevolent type of thing and building the relationship side. And what trust for me is about helping you build relationships. And I think management, leadership and life is all about developing effective, good relationships. And that's where I link the trust to it, because you can't build a relationship without developing trust.
Well, do you get some students finding this hard to take? I mean, I get the occasional student who just can't believe there's a world where leaders can be trusting.
Exactly.
And so on. And it seems to me it's a model of what's happening inside their own institution.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're in the business world in the West. It's all about competition, isn't it? And can you develop trust and be competitive at the same time? Because competition is seen as being the top dog, isn't it? And screwing people and all the other sorts of things. So yeah, I find, I suppose it depends what sort of student you get. I mean, a lot of our students, some of our students again have not really got any work experience, so they've not really experienced it. But when you get out with the managers and the people, and like on my professional doctorate program, who are used to be managing in that competitive Anglo-Saxon sort of world, then yeah, I mean they you know, they can sort of question it. Oh, this is a bit wishy-washy.
Yeah. But we get a mix of public and private, and that works because the public sector is more used to the idea that these people have to try to be.
Well, the public sector, I think, uses the notion of
trustworthy.
Trust. What we're lacking, and why we're not being very efficient and effective, is because we don't have trust. And of course, the public sector bureaucracies, you know, it doesn't encourage trust. It's all about control. And so, I think the language that's used in a lot of organisations now is we want to build better relations and trust. But of course, the structures don't allow it. So there's an awful lot of energy, I think, put into we need trust and using emotions, but it's very difficult to put into practice, isn't it?
And of course you describe it as a dilemma, because that's
it's exactly a dilemma. It's a dilemma between trust and control, which is what our chapter is all about.
And does it lead into the other chapter, which I think we should do more, you've got ethics?
Well, absolutely, because the three I use, the charismatic stuff and the transformational stuff, I mean, Cummings and McGregor, Burns' stuff, and that's where he came from, the ethical side, wasn't it? He was looking at the ethical side of the politicians and the political leadership. And so the three very much linked together, because, you know, depending what your ethics are. I mean, if your ethics are you're an egotistical, an egoist, you know, sort of then you're out there for yourself, then where's the trust? But if you're then more, I suppose, utilitarian, or certainly if you're more altruistic, then trust is a very important bit of it. And so I end it up with the ethics and where next. So I think the ethics chapter allows us nicely into some of the newer post-charismatic approaches that people are talking about, you know, the servant leadership, the distribution stuff, which don't work in practice because they're anecdotal and because they're trying to use those sort of concepts in an environment that's not conducive to it.
So what you're saying, they don't work inside the environments that people find themselves at the moment?
Yeah.
Because I rather sense that's what we're finding as well.
The top leader, and I still use a lot on the top leaders, because I very firmly believe that if the person at the top is a man, then it's no good what you talk about the other stuff. To get on, you're going to have to follow that. So the top person sets the culture, sets the values, and what we need to do is to educate those to see much more of the sort of trusting end of it.
You see, on the other hand, it seems to me the last 2 years is giving us a great opportunity in terms of an alternative way of thinking about leadership.
Absolutely.
So we now know that the loss of trust in certain types of leadership cadres is going to have to be addressed. So we know that politicians have to figure out a way of reclaiming trust.
That's right.
We know the banks are going to have to find a way of reclaiming trust. So there's great opportunities in the future for more trust-based leadership.
Well, I think there is, and I mean, it's interesting that some of the distributed and trust-based models, they've been tried to apply them in schools.
Yeah.
You know, and that's interesting because it's back to Monty Roberts working in the school in Birmingham. And well, they tried to set it off, but the evidence is that they don't seem to work. They go for a while, but then the top person, it's all right sort of saying, well, we're going to share the leadership, but there's always somebody who has the legitimate role at the top. And when things start to go wrong, or there's a crisis or anything, you know, they start to want to take control back again. I think it's an inherent thing in human beings, isn't it? The rational side of us. And so you find that they've set it off as distributed, but then within 6 months to a year, the person who's legally responsible in charge sort of says, well, I'm going to do it my way. And it seems to break down, and I think there's an area rife for sort of more research to look at. How can you overcome some of these things? But it tends to be the school, the education system that's using it, or really hooked onto it.
I think that's great. Okay, well, I think we'll stop there.
Yeah, no, fine.
Thank you very much.
That's all right.
That's a lot.